I did everything right for 6 years. Came in early, stayed late, took the shitty projects no one wanted, delivered under budget, never asked for a dime more. I trusted the system. I trusted my boss would see it. And then she forgot to file the promotion paperwork. I followed up, politely in writing with receipts. She looked me dead in the eye and said the 6 most infuriating words in corporate history. This just isn't the right time. If you've ever checked every box on your review, only to watch someone with half your experience get the title because they golfed with the VP. If you've ever typed out that angry email and then deleted it because you didn't want to seem difficult, this one's for you. My name is Emma. For 3 of those 6 years, I worked under Diane Ashby. Every time she got nervous, client call, board meeting, tough convo, she'd uncap and recap her pen. Click, click, click. A tiny sound I can still feel in my neck. This is the story of the last time I ever heard that pen click. Stay with me. It gets better and a little petty. Let me tell you about Meridian Creative. Mid-size, 40-something employees. One of those agencies that billed itself as a boutique full-service firm, which in practice meant everyone did everything, and the org chart was more of a suggestion. We had real clients, though. Healthcare Systems, a regional grocery chain, one very demanding luxury real estate developer who seemed to believe that marketing could literally make a building taller. I started there as a senior copywriter in 2017, got promoted to copy lead in 2018, and by 2019, I was functionally running the entire content department, managing 3 junior writers, sitting in on strategy calls, liaising directly with our biggest client, Hargrove Health. That account alone billed $1.2 million annually. I was the account lead, the creative director, and the client whisperer all rolled into one. My title, however, was still copy lead. My salary was $74,000. The market rate for what I was actually doing, I'd done my research, I always do my research, was $92,000 to $108,000. I wasn't asking for $108,000. I wasn't even asking for $92,000. I submitted a formal compensation review request in the fall of 2020, documented and thorough, asking for a raise to $87,500. That request went to Diane. Diane Ashby was hired as VP of Creative Services in early 2019, about 2 years after I joined the company. She came from a larger agency in New York, a fact she mentioned, on average, roughly 3 times per week. She was sharp, well-dressed, and genuinely talented at the things she was good at: pitching new business, managing up, and making a room feel like everything was under control. What she was less good at, the actual day-to-day management of a creative team. The details, the check-ins, the documentation. The fundamental administrative work of leading people. I want to be fair to Diane because I think fairness matters more than score settling. She wasn't malicious. She wasn't cruel. She was overwhelmed and understaffed and in over her head in ways she probably didn't fully see. And she coped the way a lot of managers cope, by staying focused on the high-visibility work and letting the operational stuff drift, which meant the raise I requested in October 2020 never actually got submitted to HR. I found this out in December when I followed up. Oh, Emma, yes, I've been meaning to circle back on that. This just isn't the right time. Click, click, click. I asked what the right time would look like. She said Q1. She said, let's revisit after we close out the Hargrove renewal. I closed out the Hargrove renewal in February, renewed them at a 15% contract increase, wrote every word of the proposal myself. I followed up again in March. She said, let's revisit after the spring pitch season. I followed up again in May. She said the firm was looking at some restructuring and she didn't want to make any compensation moves until things settled. We were not restructuring. I had lunch with our CFO every few weeks. I would have known. Here's what a year of this looked like in practice. October 2020. Formal request submitted in writing to Diane's inbox. December 2020. Not the right time. March 2021. Let's wait until after spring pitches. May 2021. Potential restructuring. August 2021. I was asked to take on the onboarding and management of a fourth junior writer. I said yes because I'm someone who says yes. I documented it in writing. To Diane, CC'd to HR, and noted that this expansion of my role reinforced the case for the compensation review we had been discussing. Diane responded with a single line, "Thanks for jumping in on this, Emma. You're such an asset to the team." Asset. I remember staring at that word. An asset is something the company owns. October 2021. 1 year after my original request, I submitted it again, formally, with a memo. The memo was 4 pages long and included a market rate analysis pulled from 3 industry salary surveys, a list of every account I had touched in the past year with corresponding billing figures, a direct comparison of my current responsibilities versus my job description at Hire, and a table showing the average tenure to promotion timeline at comparable firms. I had also, quietly, spent the previous 3 months printing certain things, not stealing anything, not misusing anything, just printing things that were already mine, performance reviews with Diane's signature, emails where she attributed specific campaign wins to my work, a note from the CEO complimenting what he called the Emma touch on the Hargrove materials. I kept them in a folder in my bag, not for anything specific, just because I had started to understand that in a dispute, documentation is the difference between a story and a case. Diane sat on my October 2021 memo for 6 weeks without responding. In mid-November, she called me into her office for what she described as a quick check-in. "Emma," she said, "I want you to know how much I value you. I've actually been making the case for you internally. But the timing, you know how year-end gets." Click, click, click. I said, "Diane, I want to understand concretely what would need to happen for this to move forward. Can you give me a timeline?" She gave me a timeline. She said January. I wrote down. I dated it. She saw me write it down. January came and went. February 14th, 2022. Valentine's Day, which I mention only because it adds a particular flavor of irony to what happened next. I was in the break room at 7:42 a.m. I know the time because I just checked my phone before putting it face down to eat my oatmeal in peace, when I overheard, through the glass wall, a conversation between Diane and our head of talent, a guy named Patrick, who sat 3 desks down from me. They weren't whispering. They were using the voice people use when they think a room is empty. "Yeah, we're bringing in Marcus at 88.5, maybe 90 with bonus." Marcus. I knew Marcus. He was a copy lead candidate Diane had been interviewing for a role on my team. I'd actually been asked to review his portfolio and give feedback. I'd given him a strong review because his work was good and because I genuinely thought we needed the help. He had 3 years of experience. I had 7. 88.5. I sat there for a moment with my oatmeal getting cold, and something shifted. Not dramatically. Not in a movie way. It was quieter than that. It was the specific feeling of a decision that you've already made finally catching up to your conscious mind. I was not going to wait for the right time. There was no right time. There was only the time I made for myself. I finished my oatmeal. I washed the bowl. I went back to my desk. And I opened a new document. I want to be clear about something before I walk you through what I did next. Every single step was completely legitimate. Nothing I did was sneaky, underhanded, or designed to harm anyone. I was not burning anything down. I was simply deciding to stop being passive about my own career and to be very, very organized about it. Step 1 was documentation. I had been keeping that folder for months. Now I expanded it. I went through my email archive, years of it, and I organized every message where I had been credited with specific work specific wins, specific client outcomes. I created a master spreadsheet. Campaign name, my role, client billing impact where I could find it, and the email or document that confirmed it. By the time I was done, I had 47 line items, 47 concrete, documented examples of value I had delivered to Meridian Creative. I also pulled my original offer letter. I pulled every performance review I had ever received. I pulled the job posting Diane had written for a copy lead role the previous year, a role identical to mine, posted externally, which listed a salary range of $84,000 to $95,000. That last one I had saved the day I found it. I had printed it and added a date stamp in the corner. It was sitting in my folder. I wasn't building grievance. I was building a portfolio. There's a difference. A grievance is emotional. A portfolio is evidence. Step 2 was options. I updated my resume for the first time in 3 years. Not because I was planning to leave immediately. I genuinely liked my work. I liked the clients. I liked most of the team. But because you cannot negotiate from a position of strength if you have no alternative. The best leverage you will ever have in a salary conversation is a competing offer, or at minimum, the credible possibility of one. Within 3 weeks, I had reached out to 4 former colleagues who had moved to other agencies. 2 of them came back with actual opportunities. One was a creative director role at a healthcare-focused agency in the Loop, same neighborhood, actually about 7 blocks from Meridian, at a base of $98,000. The other was a fully remote content strategy director position at a national brand, $105,000 plus equity. I interviewed for both. I made it to final rounds at both. I want to be honest here. I didn't tell anyone at Meridian what I was doing. I used my lunch hours and a couple of personal days. I don't think I was obligated to disclose it, and I don't think I was doing anything wrong. I was simply gathering information. I also, around this time, had a quiet conversation with HR, not to file a complaint, not yet. I simply asked, in the context of a general check-in, about the compensation review process. I asked how reviews were typically initiated. I asked who was supposed to submit them. I asked whether there was a record-keeping system. The HR coordinator, a careful, precise woman named Sandra who had been with the company longer than anyone, told me that compensation review requests were supposed to be logged in a system called CompTrack when submitted, tracked through VP approval, and then forwarded to the CFO's office for final sign-off. I asked whether she could see whether any requests had been logged for my name in the past 18 months. She checked. She was quiet for a moment. I'm not seeing anything in CompTrack for you, Emma. Diane had never submitted a single one. Step 3 was timing. I had 2 job offers in hand, one formal, one verbal pending paperwork. I had a folder of documentation that told a clear and specific story. I had confirmation from HR that not one of my compensation requests had ever been formally filed. Now I had to decide, what did I actually want? This is the part people skip in stories like this. They jump straight to the confrontation, the revenge, the satisfying moment of reckoning. But the most important thing I did in this entire process was sit with that question honestly. Did I want to leave? Did I want to stay? Did I want to make a point? The answer, when I was honest with myself, I wanted to be compensated fairly, and I wanted to be treated like a professional, and I would prefer to have both of those things at a company where I had already invested 6 years, but I was no longer willing to have neither. I decided to request a formal meeting with Diane and Sandra from HR. I framed it in my email as a compensation review follow-up. I kept it brief. I gave 3 days' notice. I attached nothing. The meeting was scheduled for a Thursday morning at 10 a.m. I brought my folder. Conference room, B on the 14th floor, is the smaller of the 2 meeting rooms. 6 chairs, a round table, a whiteboard that always had someone's leftover notes on it. The window faced east, which meant morning meetings came with full sun across the table. On this particular Thursday in late March 2022, it was overcast, the sky the flat gray of a Chicago spring that hasn't decided yet whether it's still winter. Diane was already in the room when I arrived at 9:58. She was in her usual seat, back to the window which she preferred. Her laptop was open. Her pen was in her hand. Sandra arrived at 10:01. She had a notepad and a printed copy of something I couldn't see from where I sat. I had chosen my seat deliberately, directly across from Diane. Good sight lines to both of them. My folder closed on the table in front of me. "Thanks for making time," I said. Diane smiled. Warm, practiced, slightly tight. "Of course. I know we've been meaning to connect on this." Meaning to connect. Like it was a coffee catch-up we'd been too busy to schedule. I said, "I want to be straightforward about what I'd like to accomplish today, so we're all on the same page." I opened my folder and placed a single sheet on the table. A one-page summary, clean, no headers, just facts. Current salary. Market rate data from 3 sources. A number, $93,000. I'm requesting a compensation adjustment to $93,000, effective the 1st of next month. Diane looked at the sheet. Her pen clicked once. "Emma, I appreciate you putting this together, but we've talked about this. The timing has been challenging, and right now—" "I know we've talked about it," I said. I kept my voice level. "That's actually something I wanted to address directly." I took out the second document, a simple timeline organized by date, showing every compensation conversation we had had from October 2020 through January 2022, with the specific response she had given each time, documented from my notes and, in 3 cases, from email threads I had printed and included as attachments. I placed it on the table and slid it toward Sandra first. Diane's eyes moved to Sandra, back to me. The pen stilled. "Additionally," I said, "I followed up with Sandra last week about the CompTrack record for my compensation reviews." I looked at Sandra, not Diane. "Sandra, do you want to address what you found?" Sandra, God bless her, was prepared for this. She had, apparently, done some additional digging after our conversation. She confirmed, carefully, that there was no record of any compensation review submission for my name in the system over the 18-month period in question. Silence. Diane's face did something interesting. It didn't collapse. She was too composed for that. But there was a particular moment where her expression shifted from managed to caught. Her chin lifted slightly. Her eyes went to the whiteboard, then back to me, then down to the table. Her pen was very, very still. "I think there may have been some miscommunication in the process," she said. Her voice was smooth, but quieter than before. "These things sometimes fall through the cracks administratively, and I take responsibility for not following up more carefully." I want to tell you that I felt a surge of triumph here, but what I actually felt was something closer to tired. Not in a defeated way, in the way you feel when you've been carrying something heavy for a long time and you finally set it down. "I appreciate that," I said, and I meant it. "I'm not here to relitigate the past. I'm here because I want a clear path forward." I placed the third document on the table. It was a copy of the job offer from the healthcare agency on the loop. Base salary of $98,000, signing bonus, title of creative director. I did not slam it down. I placed it flat, quietly facing toward them. "I have this offer," I said. "I have not accepted it. I would prefer not to leave Meridian. I've been here 6 years, and I genuinely care about this work. But I need to make a decision by end of week." Sandra looked at the offer letter. She looked at the timeline I had placed in front of her. Then she looked at Diane. Diane was looking at the offer letter. Her pen was off the table. I don't know when she had set it down. The meeting ended without a resolution that day. Sandra said she needed to bring it to the CFO and asked for 48 hours. I said that was fine. 48 hours later, Sandra called me directly. They came back at $91,000, $2,000 short of my ask. A retroactive adjustment to cover the previous quarter. A title change to creative director, which I had not explicitly asked for, but which Sandra said the CFO had approved on his own initiative. and a formal acknowledgement in writing that the compensation review process had not been handled correctly. I took the $91,000. I declined the creative director title, not because I didn't want it, but because I had already verbally accepted the offer at the other agency at $98,000. I gave my notice the following Monday. My last day was April 22nd, 2022. 4 years, 6 months, and 11 days after I had started on the 14th floor of that building on Wacker Drive. On my last day, Diane stopped by my desk. I was packing the small collection of things I kept there: a plant, a framed photo, a coffee mug from a client we'd worked with in 2019. She stood in the doorway for a moment, and she said, "I'm sorry this is how it ended." I looked up, and I said something I had been thinking about for a while. "Diane, you're good at your job in the ways that are visible. The pitches, the relationships, the room reading. I think you lost track of the parts that aren't visible. That's fixable. I hope you fix it." She nodded. She didn't say anything else. I took my plant and my mug and I went down the elevator for the last time. I want to tell you that Diane was fired and the company had a reckoning. That would be satisfying, and it would be a lie. Diane is still at Meridian Creative. As of a year after I left, she had been promoted to Chief Creative Officer. I know this because a former colleague texted me about it, and I had approximately 15 seconds of genuine outrage before I remembered that her career trajectory is not my problem anymore. The company did, apparently, overhaul its compensation review process. Sandra pushed for it. New system, new documentation requirements, HR sign-off at every stage. I don't know for certain that my situation prompted it, but the timing suggests it wasn't unrelated. The junior writer I had been managing, a woman named Cora, talented, sharp, someone I had genuinely invested in, reached out to me about a year later. She was navigating a similar situation with a new manager and wanted advice. I talked her through exactly what I had done: the documentation, the market research, the HR conversation. She got her raise. She sent me a 2-word text. It worked. That felt like something. My job at the healthcare agency was good. Genuinely good. I stayed for 2 years, got promoted, and eventually moved on to a role that I am, as of now, still in and very happy with. I will not name the company, because I do not need my current employer Googling me and finding a YouTube video. I've thought about this story a lot. Not obsessively, not with bitterness, but in the way you think about experiences that changed how you operate in the world. And I've landed on 3 things I want to leave you with. The first is this: document everything always. Not because you're planning a lawsuit, not because you're looking for a fight, but because human memory is selective and institutional memory is almost non-existent. When you write it down, you are not being paranoid. You are being a professional. Every raise conversation, every performance review, every moment where someone credits your work. Date it, save it, file it. You might never need it. If you do need it, you will be very glad you have it. The second is this: leverage is not a dirty word. We have been conditioned, especially women in my experience, to believe that advocating for ourselves is somehow aggressive or ungrateful. That the right way to get what we deserve is to wait patiently and trust that the people above us are paying attention. They are not always paying attention, not because they are bad people, but because they are busy and human and focused on their own priorities. You are allowed to create conditions where your interests are considered. Having an alternative option is not a threat. It is information. Use it. And the third, the one I come back to most often, the goal is not to win. The goal is to leave with your dignity intact. I didn't destroy Diane. I didn't need to. I made a clear, documented, professional case for what I was owed. I gave her the opportunity to respond, and when the response was inadequate, I moved on. I said something true to her on my last day. I did not say anything cruel, and I have never, not once, spent a significant amount of mental energy on what happened to her afterward. Here is the thing I most want you to hear, the thing I would screenshot if I were watching this from the couch. The best revenge is not watching them fail. It's being so busy succeeding that you forget to check. There are people right now who are 6 months into a Diane situation, a year into one, 3 years into one, and they are waiting for the right time, for the right moment, for permission they're never going to get. You don't need the right time. You need a folder, a plan, and the decision to stop waiting. My name is Emma. If this story resonated with you, I would love to hear yours. Drop it in the comments below and subscribe if you want more. These stories matter, not because they're about revenge, but because they're about finally deciding you're worth fighting for.